Greetings, family. Welcome back. We have a very important topic to discuss today. I've done some travels, but I also want to make it relevant to what's going on in world politics and foreign policy. So today, the topic is Grenada, the Black Revolution, and the colonizer's foreign policy. Now, I traveled to Grenada in early January. So I'm going to read an article by a professor named Wendell Bell. Wendell Bell is now deceased. He passed away in 2019, probably from during the COVID years. But he was talking about Grenada, and I'm going to leave this map up while I discuss part of his article called The American Invasion of Grenada, a Note on False Prophecy. So his analysis is in 1983. He's analyzing American invasion of Grenada and the power of authority to distort the truth and corrupt morality, processes that reoccurred 20 years later with much greater consequence in the case of the 2003 American-led invasion of Iraq. So he wrote this article originally in 1986. So it was republished by Emerald Publishing Group in 2008. So this is important because this scholar is giving you an introduction of the way that information can be manipulated. And so many people don't even know where Grenada is. Some people think it's Grenada, like Spain. When this was happening back in the day, people in Russia were putting out information as if it was Grenada in Spain. No, it was Grenada. Listen to the introduction of this article. Looking back on 1984, future historians may note that it was a good year for George Orwell. His dystopian novel, written in 1948, popped up on the bestseller list. Lectures and colloquia were held to honor his memory. Meetings of professional societies inspired by his prophecies were devoted to the theme of the future assessments of the accuracy of his gloomy predictions were on national television. His concepts of Big Brother, the 2 minutes hate, and thought crime had entered the popular consciousness, and the principles of newspeak and doublethink were part of everyday language. Everyone knew what was intended. For example, when the National Council of Teachers of English gave its doublespeak award to then President Ronald Reagan for naming the MX missile the Peacekeeper. Such a joke, because you now have this character that wants to be the Nobel Peace Prize winner, and he's creating havoc all over the world with war. You know what I'm talking about. The key element in Orwell's chilling vision, though, is the ability of a group in power to shape their own and others' views of reality to fit some ideological or instrumental objective. This looking back, future historians may find one of the most telling examples of this kind of shaping of Orwellian fiction becoming reality, not in 1984 itself, but as if it were a kind of rehearsal. In the last days of 1983, the case of the American invasion of the Caribbean island of Grenada. So we're talking about things that have occurred in the past. You have historical amnesia, can't even remember. I have students that never even heard of what happened with Iraq, don't even know the name of the leader that was killed. In Libya, don't even know the name of the leader that was killed. So we have historical amnesia, can't even remember the names and people that have been decimated by the empire. Although the invasion of tiny Grenada probably will not go down in history as one of the more earth-shaking incidents of our troubled age, it is nonetheless significant as a near-perfect illustration of the use of prophecy to justify present action. The Reagan administration, that was Ronald Reagan, for those that don't know, back in the 80s, gave the American people and the people of the world 3 principal reasons for action, all of them in the form of contingent statements about the future. That is, what would have happened if there had been no invasion? You're seeing the same things right now when this guy named Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, saying, well, if we hadn't have done it, then they would have hit us first. ridiculous. First, American citizens would have been taken hostage or possibly killed. Second, a Soviet-Cuban military bastion would have been established for the export of communism throughout the region, especially the Eastern Caribbean. And third, a modern military airport would have been completed at Point Salines that would have become a threat to the vital interests and the national security of the USA. Although we cannot tell now who among American leaders, including the president himself, believed these prophecies at the moment of crisis, we suspect that none of the three was credible. That is my subject of this essay. So basically, all the changes that have gone on with this so-called Iranian conflict, back in the day with this Grenadian conflict, was called Operation Urgent Fury. They always have these names. I don't know what's called now for this Iranian invasion, but we have to look at the politics of the people that were on this little island that was talking some strong revolutionary politics. The island's leading politician was Eric Gary, a labor leader who became independent Grenada's first prime minister. It was bad luck for Grenada because he turned out to be ruthless in the treatment of his opponents, corrupt, sometimes bizarre, and so it was claimed by some responsible people certifiably mad. Thus, when Maurice Bishop and the members of the New Jewel movement, that is Joint Endeavor for Welfare, Education, and Liberation, carried out a bloodless coup on the 13th of March, 1979, they suspended the Constitution and told Gary not to come back. Most Grenadians and West Indians rejoiced. In conclusion, as I'm going to talk about this introduction, the crisis reached a peak when a few Grenadian soldiers massacred over 100 people on the 19th of October, 1983. About 15,000 people had gathered earlier in St. George's, about 3,000 of whom, including a large number of schoolchildren, went off and freed Bishop from house arrest. Schoolchildren. Remember now, them schoolchildren were killed in Iran. The first casualties in this so-called escapade over there in the Middle East, in Iran. Children were killed. Then they marched to Fort Rupert, disarming the soldiers there. Sometime later, when the armed troops of the People's Revolutionary Army arrived, someone began shooting. By the time it was over, Bishop, 3 cabinet members, 2 labor leaders, and many members of the crowd had been killed. Bishop and most of the leaders were in fact executed after being captured. And there's politics today about who and who does not support what Maurice Bishop was doing. By Friday, the 28th of October, the battle was over, except for a few isolated pockets of resistance. Although only a few days long, just like this so-called war in Iran, it's supposed to be a short war, there have been some casualties. The operation was not without its blunders and tragic accidents. The same thing has happened right now in Iran, where they say the pilots that were shot over, I guess, in Kuwait, before the planes went down, they said it was friendly fire. Robert A. Pastor, 1983, former senior staff member of the United States National Security Council, responsible for Latin American and Caribbean affairs, later reminded members of Congress in his testimony for the House Committee on Foreign Affairs of some of them. 4 members of the U.S. Navy SEALs drowned before the invasion started. 1 American unit called for an airstrike on another, wounding over a dozen American soldiers. American Rangers were killed and wounded when 2 helicopters collided, and United States Cobra helicopters, mistaking the former Fort Matthew, then a mental hospital, for Fort Frederick, destroyed it, killing between 18 and 30 inmates. Official American sources admit to 18. Furthermore, attacking the Cubans at Point Salines instead of moving directly to defend the medical students may have been a blunder if it It's true that the Cubans only fired to defend themselves. Now look, I did this whole island. I went through all these parishes, if you want to call them that. Why they still call them saints, not giving them black or African names, not sure, but I did the whole island. It's about, 117,000 people that live there. So as I'm there in January, guess what? Almost got stuck because of the escapades of the colonizer. Just for the first 3 months in 2026, the colonizer is on the prowl. You got a government shutdown. You got this invasion of Venezuela and extracting the president of another country and bringing him to the United States. You got the Caribbean conflict because was the United States is doing this. What's going on with Trinidad and supporting, and Grenada said we're not involved in it, and other countries saying we don't want to be in some supporting, and so now you got Caribbean conflict with one another. Greenland, you got the United States government, the colonizer wanting to go now get this large place called Greenland and use that and extract their resources. You got Cuba, you're now putting more sanctions, you're trying to cripple these people. You're making it even more difficult for them to survive. And so that's another thing that's going on within these 3 months. And then now you have this escapade in Iran. And guess what? Iran has shot back. It has changed the scope of what we are talking about of the empire controlling things. And why is all this going on anyway? Wow, is this now all to avoid the evidence of screwing little white girls? Creating havoc all over the world so you're now not even paying attention. Again, we're dealing with 1984 and how we're talking about how war is peace, ignorance is strength, freedom is slavery. Maurice Bishop, got to know the name. Many of you don't know the name because you haven't heard of any history. You're not reading the history. You're not remembering history. You have historical amnesia. Maurice Bishop was the man. Some people critique. I don't know why they're critiquing. If he's talking about people having the power to control their destiny, let's listen to his words. What is Maurice Bishop saying? A great book about him is called Maurice Bishop Speaks. If you get a chance to read that book, it's definitely a good book.
The real reason for all of this hostility is because some perceive that what is happening in Grenada can lead to a new socio-economic and political path of development. They give all kinds of reasons and excuses, some of them credible, some utter rubbish. There's an interesting one that we saw very recently in a secret report of the State Department. I want to tell you about that one, so you can reflect on that one. That secret report made this point, that Grenada is different to Cuba and Nicaragua, and the Grenada Revolution is in one sense even worse, using their language, than the Cuban and Nicaraguan revolutions, because the people of Grenada and the leadership of Grenada speaks English and therefore can communicate directly to the people of the United States. It is becoming more and more difficult for developing third world countries to go forward, because unfortunately our economies remain by and large dependent on and tied to the capitalist world economies. And therefore, when the capitalist world goes through their cyclical crises, one after the other, it has an immediate effect on us. As we say at home, when the capitalist world catches a cold, we catch pneumonia. And the crisis in the capitalist world has been deep. In all of the developed industrialized countries, there is greater and greater unemployment. And as this unemployment goes deeper and deeper into the society, the people who feel it the most are the poor and working people. The massive cutbacks, the massive cuts in social welfare, The cuts are not coming in the arms race. The cuts are not coming out of the arms budget. I understand the talk is to spend $3 trillion over 5 years. The mind boggles. That is the kind of money that is supposed to be consumed in arms. But while that kind of money is being consumed in arms, hospitals are closing down, jobs are being, more and more retrenchment is taking place, pensions are being reduced, medic aid is being reduced. In other words, the arms is swallowing up the money. The people are not benefiting.
Maurice Bishop speaks. You heard the words, and you don't even know him. You need to get to know the history. So with us having this historical amnesia, this happened 43 years ago when we're talking about the United States invading a sovereign nation. Think about all these invasions that have occurred since and how you better protect yourself because this colonizer does not respect treaties. They just had a meeting with these Iranians, and while they're having the meeting, they start the war. You can't negotiate with these people. So, Bishop, may his soul rest in peace. The brother passed away, executed in 1983. The brother was making the connections with those that were supporting him. The so-called Red Scare and the communistic viewpoint that America put on people, like Castro, some bad guy. Look, he was just trying to have his people living in a socialistic perspective where everybody had access to the resources. So Bishop had to go where he had contacts. So Castro was not the enemy of African black people. Neither was Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, not the enemy of African black people. If it wasn't for them, we would not have had the arms to fight colonialism. So how can that be your enemy, African black people? Castro met with Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson was involved. May his soul rest in peace. Just passed away. It's 2026. Jesse Jackson helped to relieve and remove and get some of those hostages in Iran, the Iranian crisis that was going on years ago. If it wasn't for that black man, we wouldn't have had access to getting them freed. And guess what? Those Iranians let the black people go first because they understood the oppression and the black power movement that was going on in the United States. So Iran is also not the enemy of African black people. Castro was not the enemy of African black people. So we have to look at the foreign policy and how it is dictating things because, again, if they start invading Jamaica, they start invading Antigua, start invading these black nations, like Burkina Faso, where do you stand? Better stand somewhere because, again, the colonizer is not trying to relieve you. While I'm over there in Grenada, a chance to be comfortable, enjoy the environment, and you think about how peaceful it is that people just want to live, not just by the sea, but just to be with one another, to be in a collective harmony with nature. And as I'm there, I started to see those military helicopters, planes. You saw how close Grenada is to Venezuela, so I almost did not get out because they shut the airspace down. There you see the helicopters altering the beauty and the peace and of the environment and the warships and just creating havoc in the Caribbean. So I was a war correspondent for a few days while I was there in Grenada.
War correspondent.
Just trying to enjoy life. That's what people want to do. You got the colonizers creating havoc in everybody's world. So over there in Grenada, there's a fort called Fort Frederick. It's one of the few forts in the world which has never fired a shot in anger. It was built by the French, who had wrested the island from the British in 1779. So basically all these Europeans are fighting over African and black nations. The French realized that had such fortifications existed at the time of their assault on Grenada, their attempt to storm Hospital Hill and thereby capture the island could have failed. So, one of the first acts of the new French government was to commence building a series of forts on Richmond Hill. Fort Frederick and the neighboring Forts Matthew to the north, and Adolphus and Lucas to the south. Mount George Estate, the property of the Honorable William Lucas, was forcibly appropriated for the purpose. 4 years later, the Treaty of Versailles gave the island back to Britain, leaving the British to complete what the French had started. Tell you, fighting over booty, that is African people, resources, colonizers going all over the world creating havoc. So there's the structure of the fort where they never fired a shot. There's the French and these British fighting one another over black people, over the island, over commencing slavery. So the fort itself, overlooking the harbor, you can understand how they were viewing any ships coming in. They have a great view to fire a shot, but they never fired a shot. But they created this fortress as protection. Now you see the cruise ships behind us, not behind us, but the cruise ships that are coming in. Everything's now supposed to be peaceful. Yeah, that's nice, but again, let these people live be on their own, live comfortable. In the past, the natives of the land made mistakes by allowing these French to even come on the island. This is called Leaper's Hill. You see me standing there by the monument reflecting Leaper's Hill. I'm looking over the sea. In the location we're at, it's actually in a cemetery. That is actually a cannon right there in the cemetery. Leaper's Hill, so overlooking the water, right there by the hill. It says, in 1651, the Caribs, realizing that they had made a mistake by allowing the French to remain on the island, became hostile. They killed many French men who in turn retaliated and with their superior weapons decided to wipe out the Caribs. The last stand the Caribs made was on a precipice in the north of the island, but they were completely defeated. Those who survived, rather than surrendering, jumped over the precipice, which the French called Le Morne des Sauteurs, or Leaper's Hill. The town that grew up there is known as Sauteurs. So this cannon, they probably didn't just jump. Them colonizing fools probably forced them to jump by blowing them up with the darn cannon. So Leaper's Hill is a historical site that you can visit when you go to the north side of Grenada. Grenada, Spice Island, nutmeg. Nutmeg is one of the biggest products that they've produced, and also nutmeg is good for everything in terms of health, eating, food, putting on your body, getting rid of inflammation. So nutmeg is powerful, so that's one of their commodities. You may not know, but Brother Ken Bridges was trying to create something called the Mata Corporation, where you had products that were coming out that used by black people. So this is going to be marketed worldwide, but he was there making some connections with nutmeg and the Grenadian government. This brother was assassinated by that sniper. You know the story. Go ahead and check it out. The sniper that was in D.C. shooting out of a trunk, killing people. Why did this brother have him get shot? You have to ask the question. He was shot and killed October 11th, 2002. Brother Maurice Bishop was killed on October 19th, 1983. So we're just talking about a span of time, not connecting Bishop to Brother Bridges, but both powerful brothers who were trying to create some things for the world, for African black people to survive on their own. Both of them taken out. One assassinated, one executed, one assassinated. The same thing that happened to them. While I was there, I got a chance to go to the House of Chocolate. So beyond the nutmeg, you got cocoa, cacao, chocolate that's there in Grenada. Very important for the commodity. So, cacao in Grenada. After there was a rebellion by this guy named Julian Fadon. He was a slave revolt leader. After the rebellion, cultivation resumed, and the reason why some of the countries that are there in the Caribbean have problems with economy and the flow of money because they're monocultures. Well, it wasn't a monoculture here in Grenada. It was coffee, cacao, cotton. So they were able to survive a little bit better than others. That's a picture of Faidon, and basically some people say that's not really him. There's other images that look different than that, but he was the leader that was trying to get the European off the necks of the Africans who were enslaved. Look at this. In the museum or this location, we're looking at the origins of chocolate cacao. So it says right here, chocolate origins, Mexico. That's not Grenada, but we're talking about how people are looking at the use of this particular product. And it has the Mayan. So the Olmec came before the Mayan because the Olmec told the Mayan what to do. So it says right here, Mayan 1900 to 600 BC. Check this out though. As you look at the Central America area, Olmec, historians believe the Olmecs first discovered that the cacao fruit was edible by observing monkeys eating it. They soon realized the tree produced a fruit with 1,000 flavors and nearly as many uses. They began cultivating cacao in equatorial Mexico and devised the fermenting, drying, and crushing of the cacao beans, possibly the first humans to consume chocolate in the form of a drink, which they mixed with water, spices, chilies, and herbs. They drank from special round jars called tecomates, used for religious rituals and medicine. So the Olmec over there in Central America, those Olmec were African people coming from West Africa, landing over there, traveling in the way in the winds, the trade winds. They were able to make it over that side of the world and in Central America. And that's where the Pyramid Age came from, because of Africans, the Olmecs traveling and then influencing these other indigenous people that were there. I got a colleague named Tammy Phillips who's got this product that she's now marketing in Grenada called, well, she's using soursop tea as the base, but her company is called ourbayleaf.co. Please check out that website. Support our products. I'm there in the stores in Grenada and seeing her products on the shelves. So exciting. So exciting. So Tammy Phillips right there, another store, observing her products in the store. She is a fascinating scientist, written books on black hair. She's got these products done with soursop, bay leaves, looking at sea moss. And so I consider her a fabulous bionutraceutical genius. And she also introduced me to a brother named Guido, Marcel Guido. He has Guido Marcel. He has concocted some drinks, Campeche, something that's pretty popular in the world, but they're in the Caribbean. It's supposed to be like an aphrodisiac and good drink. But he's also created many other products that deal with health and nutrition. So I got a chance to meet the modern George Washington Carver there in the Grenadian island. And both of them have Trinidadian backgrounds, but it's just beautiful to be around people who are trying to do something positive for the community. And if you did not know, Malcolm X's mama is from Grenada. Got to visit her house, even though the house wasn't there, just the location. But that's where Malcolm had the roots from, Grenada. That plane right there is one of the planes that was shot down. I told you earlier when the debacle, the invasion of the United States coming into Grenada, some of the ships were shot down. So that's one of them. On the whole complex there, that's where the other airport was. I think it's Saline's, but that's where I was enjoying an opportunity to see different parts of the island. The Chinese have been there, and guess what? They built housing. Look at that. Nice housing for the people. Grenada has no crime that I saw. When you look at the signs, community policing, I don't know where that happens in the United States. Then I got slave patrols going on in the United States. If it looks odd, report it. So community policing is something that's important. When I was leaving Grenada, I saw and heard the United States placed a so-called warning on traveling Grenada. Terrible. And even by January 21st, they had, that is the United States government, put a freeze on people from Grenada having access to travel to the United States. Check it out. January 21st. All these steps to hinder these black countries from having development. And that's what the attack on Cuba is right now. So while China is building things, the United States is pushing poison. That's why even on the African continent, as African people living here in the United States, and you see what has been done to the continent, not for development, they've underdeveloped Africa. Read Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Understand the opportunity for growth has been decimated because they don't want those people having access. But you have companies like Coca-Cola coming over there pushing poison, taking the people's water supply to make this soda. So they're all up in the environment. Beyond pushing soda, you know about, and you heard about that movie, They Cloned Tyrone. Oh my goodness, Kentucky Fried Chicken is in all these islands. You see cars wrapped around the corner to get that Kentucky Fried Chicken. What's in there? What's making them eat that? It's like the Chick-fil-A United States. What's in the chicken? But they got it and got people buying all that stuff. And lastly, I was actually invited to give a speech and a talk at the Oshogbu House. And this is owned or run by Yolanda McQueen. Much respect to her. She allowed me to have a safe place and residence to stay. She is the CEO of Mount Pure. Delicious water. Like one of the most original natural reserves for sparkling water. So this stuff puts Perrier to shame. But we got to support it. She's got to be able to market it. And of course, you got governmental entities that sometimes don't support the people, like Tammy is having a challenge in our own country with her own products because the stores will want to get the other products like Lipton or some other companies rather than having your own natural products from your own country. Even with Mount Pure, they may have struggled fighting against Coca-Cola and the Dasani, even though this may be more pure, more healthy. But all those battles are going on. But much respect for this sister right here, Rolanda McQueen, for creating jobs and having opportunities for people to have healthy water. So in conclusion, I had a great time visiting the people, seeing the land. In my lecture, there was a great conversation and talk. I was actually the first person to give a lecture at the Shogbu House, and won't be the last. They will continue on. Right there, I think that's one of the chefs, Maurice Bishop relative. And so my colleagues, oh my goodness, they are all supportive, and I appreciate the service that was provided to me. But I'm just trying to say Grenada is a beautiful place. We have to travel and see the world. If you don't see the world, you don't know what's going on in the world. If you hadn't been to Cuba, hadn't been to Iran, I have not. Hadn't been to Venezuela, I have not. But all those places, the United States is vilifying like there's some bad people. Guess what? The United States invaded Grenada like there's some bad people. Beautiful people. So let's not get caught up in the propaganda of what's really going on in the world, but let's kind of break things down to understand that we have a mission, and our mission is to change the world. Peace. We shall be back.